We are live. PE with ABC, May 31st, 2020. The topic is Black nationalism and Black women, examining the role of Black women in the growth and embrace of Black nationalism as a viable political ideology for Black liberation. We are live. Peace and Black Power family. My name is Makonnen Tendaji. I'm the Southern California Black Community Programs Director for the African Black Coalition. This is PE with ABC. Today is May 31st, 2020. The topic for today is Black nationalism and Black women. We will be examining the role of Black women in the growth and embrace of Black nationalism as a viable political ideology for Black liberation. I'm going to give it a few minutes just to allow folks to enter the Zoom, and then we will go ahead and get started. So again, we're going to go ahead and get started at about 5:10. Going to give it about 5 minutes or so just to allow people to enter the Zoom, and then we'll get started from there. The topic for today is Black nationalism and Black women, examining the role of Black women in the embrace and growth of Black nationalism as a viable political ideology for Black liberation. So people are kind of trickling in now. So in about 5 minutes, we'll get started. The goal is for us to grasp a fundamental analysis of the role between Black women and Black nationalism, or rather I should say the connection between the two. There's a common mainstream notion of Black nationalism being a male-dominated or a male-oriented ideology, and the goal with today's lesson is to dispel that notion and actually provide historical context and evidence that it's quite the contrary, that Black women embraced Black nationalism as a political ideology, especially during the height of Black nationalism in the United States. If we look at the Garvey movement, the Universal Negro Improvement Association of the 1910s and 20s, that's, I would argue, the peak of this embrace by Black women of Black nationalism. And throughout the lesson this evening, we'll be looking at different examples as to the role of Black women, not only as subscribers to the principles of Black nationalism, but also the roles of Black women as practitioners and as theorists of Black nationalism. The primary text that we will engage is Set the World on Fire by Keisha Blaine. Set the World on Fire, Black Nationalist Women and the Global Struggle for Freedom. This is a fairly new text. It was published 2018. So by no means is the study of Black women and Black nationalism a thorough one. And we're going to do our best in the time that we do have, now, just to, again, cover a lot of the surface level analysis. The goal is, of course, for us all that are participating this evening to do our own further research into this topic. And as participants of PE ABC, we're actually going to be providing a recommended reading list on this topic at the end of this webinar. The goal for us as the African Black Coalition is to educate our people and then also instill in them a desire to want to seek knowledge. Kwame Ture has this, Kwame Ture says in one of his lectures that our responsibility is to educate our people and give them a love of knowledge to want to seek knowledge, right? We wish to embody that goal in PE with ABC. So again, we're gonna get started in about 2 minutes or so. It's gonna allow folks to trickle on in. The primary mode of communication between myself and you all as participants will be through email. So every month that you do sign up for the webinar, you'll receive an email from me with the Zoom login information. And the reason why we do that is to ensure that everyone who is participating within these webinars is serious about participating. You know, we're not just going to throw up the Zoom information on social media and say, you know, open house, anyone can come in, right? We have an obligation and a right to determine and dictate who comes into these spaces that we build for ourselves, right? And we stand by that right of ours. So about 2 more minutes. And the primary way that this webinar will be interactive between me and you as participants is through the chat box. So at any point in time, if you have any questions, if you would like me to go back a slide or two or what have you, please just indicate that in the chat box, and I have it up right here, so I'll be able to monitor that. You know, we do our best with what we have to be interactive. Of course, I would much rather be in person with you all just to feel that energy and to be able to be in that space. But we do what we can, by any means necessary with what we have. So we're gonna make that happen. Okay, I think now's a good time to get it started up. And for those of you who are returning to PE with ABC, you know that we actually ran this program on a weekly basis during the month of April. So that's 4 different webinars within the month of April. And based on the success of that program, we worked to extend it over the course of this next year. And we'll be doing it on a monthly basis. So we'll have one in May, June, July. The goal is to also go back to that weekly basis. So the goal is to have weekly webinars in August for Black August, and then in February, next February for Black History Month. So those will be the 2 months that we go back to our original weekly webinars, to be able to engage with our people as much as possible, of course, right? So let's go ahead and do this. Now, one new thing that we've decided to add during difficult times and emotionally heavy times such as these, of course, there's no time in our lives as Black people in North America, to experience life that in a non-heavy way, of course, right? We're deep behind enemy lines, and we are fighting every day to reclaim what has been taken from us. So during these heavy times, what we're going to do is incorporate libation into our webinars. And for those who do not know, libation is a traditional African custom all throughout the continent. Various groups of our people perform this act. And what libation is we take a moment of our time before we start any activity or any, anything in a group, in a space. We take the time to call upon the names of our ancestors. We call upon those unnamed into our space to watch over us and to guide us and to ensure that we are protected in this space. And we do that through pouring water into a plant. And water is a signal of life, right? Where we are 60% made of water. The earth is over 75% covered in water. Water is life. And then the plant represents us as a people. May we, plant seeds and nurture those seeds so that the next generation may reap what we sow. Kwame Ture says in one of his lectures that what we, the current generation, are sowing was not reaped by us, but by the past generation. And then the past generation reaped what was sown by the past generation, so on and so forth. So us as a generation has a moral obligation and a duty to sow for the next generation to reap. And performing libation before we start PE with ABC tonight is that first little step, right? So let's go ahead and do that. I have with us just a glass of water here, right? And how we'll do it to make it interactive is we can, again, use the chat box, or if you like, you can, when the time comes, I'll signal to everyone if you like to speak the names of an ancestor, maybe you know personally, or a historically significant ancestor, please unmute yourself and say those names. So when I get to that section in libation, I'll say, we can unmute ourselves and say those names, because I would like to hear your voices and be able to channel that energy you're giving me into libation. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's see, I'll put this right here. So we pour libation to those ancestors who were the first man and the first woman to walk upright. We say Ashe. We pour libation to our ancestors, those who invented mathematics and physics, and they were the first to look at the stars at nighttime and discover astronomy. We say Ashe. We pour libation for our ancestors who organized and got themselves into family units and defended those family units with their life. We say Ashe. We pour libation for our ancestors who fought to the death to resist enslavement and being subjected to the will of another people. We say Ashe. We pour libation to those who, upon boarding the ships of our enemies, made the decision to jump off and give up their life because they understood that they would much rather die than live a life in bondage. We say Ashe. And now we pour libation for our ancestors who, upon arriving on the hells of these shores, fought to the death again and resisted with all their might. We say Ashe. And now is the time for all of us who are participating. If we would like to unmute ourselves, of course, I'm not gonna force anyone to do so, but if you would like to, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and say the name of an ancestor that we can pour libation for. And at the end of everyone's name, I'll hear it and we'll say Ashe to that. So I'll start it off. Brother George Floyd, we'll say Ashe. We will give libation for the Honorable Marcus Garvey. Ashe. We pour libation for our sister Corinne Gaines. Ashe. We pour libation for Denise McNair, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robertson, the 4 little girls who were bombed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. We say Ashe. We pour libation for Breonna Taylor, Tatiana Jefferson, for Tony McDade. We say Ashe. And then we save this last bit of water for those of our ancestors who are unnamed, right? The thousands upon thousands who have lost their life at the hands of this wicked enemy, and we have not had the privilege of knowing their names, but we still recognize them and pour libation for them. We say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. So that's how we're going to start the beginning of each P with ABC. Again, to center ourselves and to be able to ground ourselves in an understanding, a collective understanding that we have a very serious duty to perform, not just for ourselves, but for our ancestors that preceded us, as well as for our children who are yet to be born, right? So let's go ahead and I would like for us all also to watch just a couple of clips from some of our ancestors, because what I find is that during times such as these, especially polarizing and turbulent times, I find solace in our ancestors and reading what they teach us, listening to their voices, right? Walking in their footsteps, walking in their path. That brings me comfort and safety and belonging. So we're going to watch just a few short clips from some ancestors, again, to ground ourselves properly.
Cannot be free in America or anywhere else where there is capitalism and imperialism until until we can get people to recognize that they themselves have to make the struggle and have to make the fight for freedom every day in the year, every year, until they win it. Thank you.
So that was Ella Baker, our ancestor, giving a speech that was actually at a rally for, what was it for the, it was recognizing the autonomy of Cuba and the various islands and nations throughout Central America as well as the Caribbean. So she was there for that. Now we're going to watch another one from our ancestor Kwame Ture. And in this one, he's speaking on the significance of what we're doing right now, political education. And he says that political education, in order for it to be effective, has to be constant. So as the African Black Coalition, we understand this, and we also understand that delivering monthly webinars is not constant enough. And so we reinforce that in our daily work.
You know, the truth is very simple, but sometimes implementation of the truth, that's where difficulty arises. The word is constant, political education. Constant. I mean, like they are. You know, whether you want to know something about the OJ trial or not, you're going to know something about it in this country today. Whether you want to or not. Now, I don't care about it, really. You know, what you do about it? He ain't never did nothing for us. Why care about it? Well, he might go to the UNIA, they might lynch him. Well, they've lynched better Africans than that unjust system. You know, so really, that's not my problem. But you cannot get around it. Because they're constant, constant, constant. The example we give all the time is clear. Every child in this country over 8 years old knows about Coca-Cola. Yet Coca-Cola doesn't stop putting up signs or whistling jingles. So we must be as enthusiastic about winning our people over the struggle as Coca-Cola is about selling Cokes. Theirs is constant. You can't hardly turn without hearing buy a Coke, get a Coke, get Coke, get Coke, get Coke. I mean, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. As a matter of fact, they can bring it to your bedroom. That's what they do. So when you go to sleep, you see. When you get up, you see. I'm going to bed. Give me a Coke. I'm getting up. Give me a Coke.
So again, reinforcing this idea of the political education that we organize and deliver to our people has to be as thorough and as constant and as relentless as the enemy is in the propaganda that is pushed out by them in their institutions, right? And that's the only way that political education can be effective, right? And then we'll watch just one more, and then we'll go ahead and get started. This is also from Kwame Ture. I believe that this one it especially is relevant today during these times on the question of do we protest, do we riot? You know, what's the solution? That's been the sort of underlying theme to all of what has been going on is people are scared. Our people are afraid and do not know what to do, right? And Kwame Ture articulates that as those of our people who are educated, as those of us who are conscious, we have a particular task to fulfill. And I'll let our ancestor go ahead and explain that to us right now.
As the instinctive love of justice for the people is clear, there's no question here. The task of revolutionary organizers is to take this instinct and bring it on the level where we come to be rational, where we come to reason. Thus, we must come to make unconscious struggle conscious. We must come to make unconscious struggle conscious. This, then, is the struggle for Pan-Africanism in the future. We've demonstrated that our people automatically have a strong feeling for the love of Africa, just by the maps they wear around their neck of Africa, just as the African names they give their people. We have seen this force for African unity is strong among the masses, but it's on an instinctive level. It must be raised from the instinctive level to the level of ration. Simply put, we have the hearts of our people, but what we need is their minds.
So again, I wanted us to watch that one because I do believe it's very pertinent and relevant to all that is going on today. The short answer to that question of what's the solution, right? I believe a large part of that answer is to study and to find solace in the work and the sacrifices of our ancestors, because the blueprint has already been laid for us. It's up to us as the current generation with the most revolutionary potential to harness the teachings, the wisdom, the knowledge, the strength of our ancestors, to harness all of that, right, and drive it behind transforming the material conditions of our people today, right? So let's go ahead and get straight to what we have planned for us all today. Again, the topic is Black nationalism and Black women, examining the role of Black women in the embrace and the growth of Black nationalism as a viable political ideology for Black liberation. And the primary text that we'll be covering, again, is this book, Set the World on Fire, Black Nationalist Women and the Global Struggle for Freedom by Keisha Blaine. This was published in 2018. And while it isn't without its, shortcomings and challenges, I do believe it's the most thorough text that gives a thorough analysis of Black nationalism and Black women today. So this is here's just an overview of what we will be covering in our course today. So the principles of Black nationalism, we'll be looking at the complexity and the evolution of nationalist ideology, and with a specific focus on Set the World on Fire. We'll look at this idea of revolutionizing leadership. Then we'll also explore Black women and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA. We'll look at another movement, another organization, the peace movement of Ethiopia. And then we will wrap it up with examining the dynamics of nationalist organizing in the Jim Crow South. And again, this is a fundamental analysis of this topic. By no means is it the end all be all. Here's everything you need to know, and you don't need to know anything else. This just is the tip of the iceberg. The rest of the iceberg is up for us to do our own analysis and research, because even in the preparation of this lesson today, I had attempted to put together a lesson that covered the entire book, and the lesson was about 80 slides, right? Don't worry, I trimmed it. I cut it down because it was necessary, right? But what that signals to us is that there's so much more knowledge and so much more analysis for us to do that we can't walk away from this evening's webinar and go, all right, I'm an expert on Black nationalist women now. That isn't the case, right? It's not the goal. So to review, the basic principles of Black nationalism are self-determination. It's this idea of do for self, right? Martin Delany, one of the pioneers of Black nationalism, said that our elevation must be the result of self-efforts and work of our own hands. These are the proper and only means of elevating ourselves and attaining equality in this country or any other country. There's also the principle of freedom or death, also known as separation or death. Henry Highland Garnett, another pioneer, said, I would rather die, we should rather die free men than live to be slaves. And then another principle is anti-colonialism. So all of the facets and machinations of colonialism as an ideology and as a practice, Black nationalism is in opposition to those. Other principles are the principle of self-definition. This is important when we look at the role of culture and the role of values in colonizing and oppressing a people, right? Self-definition calls for it's the fundamental component of the revolution of the mind that many activists believe was a prerequisite for the successful implementation of their numerous and varied plans for revolutionizing society. So self-definition as a principle argues that before we can even organize and demonstrate physically, we must first organize and reevaluate and do serious work mentally. And then another principle is that Black nationalism is pro-immigration, and that's immigration with an E. And immigration is the act of leaving one's own country to settle permanently in another, moving abroad. So those are the principles there. This quote comes from an article on Black women leaders and Black nationalist women. Women were not simply helpmates to men, but the creators and constructors of the intellectual, ideological, and organizational underpinnings of the Black nationalist project in the 20th century. So this lesson that we are covering tonight is is hopefully a prime example of this quote right here, right? So we have Assata Shakur in the middle, Amy Jacques Garvey on the left, and then Midi Marlena Gordon on the right. We will learn about these two on the ends right here. So Set the World on Fire as a book, a very powerful and very profound book. What it does is it centers on women leaders who were actively involved in several Black political organizations of the period. Many of the women chronicled in this book were active members of Marcus Garvey's UNIA, the dominant Black nationalist organization in the United States and worldwide in the immediate post-World War I era. Oh, and don't worry about frantically copying notes or anything like that. Of course, take notes, but this presentation in its entirety will be made available to you all at the end of this webinar. So don't worry, you'll have access. So now on to this notion of ideology as complex and something that is constantly evolving, right? And what Keisha Blaine articulates is that the key figures in this book expressed distinct concerns as well as utilized diverse political approaches that were influenced by various factors, including their socioeconomic backgrounds, their personal upbringings, their specific locales, and their organizational affiliations. Regardless of these distinctions, however, they were all Black nationalists, a term they often used to describe themselves. This is crucial for us to understand. When we are talking about the role of Black women within Black nationalism. In absolute terms, the women that are in this book were Black nationalists, and they refer to themselves as such, right? Is Zoom going to be made available on your website? Yes, it will be, to answer your question in the chat. There we go. Now, Keisha Blaine articulates this concept of proto-feminist consciousness, and this is an interesting concept for us to understand. She goes on, she writes in her book that this is an opposition to gender inequality that predated the feminist movements of the 1960s and the 1970s. She says that Black nationalist women during the early to mid 20th century often exhibited feminist beliefs and employed strategies that foreshadowed modern feminist movements of the 1960s and 1970s. So this is crucial because what we have is a group of Black women who are articulating certain beliefs and values that today we would listen to and go, oh, that sounds like feminism, or that sounds like, the movement for women's rights. What we need to be clear about, though, is that the women during this time period were not articulating these views in the name of feminism, but in the name of freedom for Black and African people. So although they had this proto-feminist consciousness, that does not necessarily make them feminists, right? The previous slide told us these Black women were nationalists in every sense of the word. So that has to be clear. Despite these overt expressions of feminism, Black nationalist women's gender and sexual politics were far more complex. The women in this book critiqued male chauvinism and patriarchy on one hand and embraced traditionally conservative perspectives on gender and sexuality on the other. In many ways, Black nationalist women's ideological complexity mirrors the ideas and experiences of nationalist women in post-colonial Middle Eastern and South Asian societies. So again, complex, highly, right? The politics, the ideology, the values of Black women during this time period were not cut and dry. So it is invalid for us studying them today to go, oh, they're feminists, because that's too simplistic of an analysis to put to a complex development of ideology. This is a book, Joy James is a radical feminist, and she, in her Readers Seeking the Beloved Community, she writes that there is no master narrative that frames the concerns of all Black women and their organizations. The multiplicity of ideologies reveals varying degrees of political efficacy and risk for social change. This diversity is often obscured by the framing of feminism in ways that either erase the contributions of radical Black women or depict a homogenous Black feminism as a corrective or rebellious appendage to either anti-racist or feminist struggles. Resistance has historically challenged and shaped Black female praxis across a broad ideological spectrum. This is a long way of saying that Black women as a group have always embodied a wide range of different beliefs, different values, different ethics, different ideologies, different morals. So to throw them all under the auspices of feminism or Black feminism is to overly simplify and even erase that complexity, right? So that's important for us to know as we study these women and as we embark in our own research and study of Black women throughout history. Then there's this idea of revolutionizing leadership. Eunice Lewis was a UNI member from Chicago. On April 19th, 1924, she wrote The Black Woman's Part in Race Leadership, which appeared on the women's page of the Negro World, Our Women and What They Think. It was on this date that Eunice Lewis articulated this concept of the new Negro woman. And we'll also see throughout this presentation that writing, publishing, and newspapers and propaganda through literature was a major avenue for Black nationalist women to articulate their views, right? And let's explore this idea of the new Negro woman. There are many people who think that a woman's place is only in the home, to raise children, cook, wash, and attend to the domestic affairs of the house, Lewis noted. This idea, however, does not hold true to the new Negro woman, she continued. The new Negro woman, Lewis insisted, was intelligent, worked equally with men, was business savvy, and most significantly, was committed to the revolutionizing the old type of male leadership in the UNIA and the community at large. Again, when we hear that, taking it out of its context, we go, wow, that sounds like women's equality. That sounds like feminism. That sounds like women's rights. And it does. We also we need to be mindful that we are not removing this from its context. So while Eunice Lewis here is articulating what we would call feminist views, Eunice Lewis at the time was using her perspective to forward the nationalist agenda and the nationalist perspective. So we see here that the views that predate feminism were not used by Black women to drive feminism, but to drive Black nationalism, right? And we'll see further examples of this. Black nationalist women pioneers created opportunities for women to have greater visibility and autonomy than Garvey originally envisioned. In addition to adopting a proto-feminist stance, women in the UNIA articulated several strands of Black nationalism, drawing upon a rich and long tradition of Black nationalist thought in the United States and across the diaspora. Women in the Garvey movement during the 1920s promoted Pan-Africanism and attempted to mobilize Black men and women against racial discrimination, colonialism, and imperialism. So again, we have Black women who are nationalists, articulating certain views to drive Black women forward to the forefront of leadership in the name of and in the spirit of Black nationalist women. This is important because we see that Black women were able to expand Marcus Garvey's original vision. And this is important because we can utilize that in the conversations and the discourse around Black nationalism and Black women as a collaborative and interdependent relationship. So now on to several Black women, and not only their roles within the UNI, but their significant contributions. Similar to the Black Panther Party, Black women played an instrumental role in shaping the organization, right? So little known to mainstream cultural understandings, it was actually the Honorable Marcus Garvey and his first wife, Amy Ashwood Garvey, who worked together to found the UNIA. And in Keisha Blaine's book, she gives specific personal narratives from Amy Ashwood Garvey herself in the early days of the UNIA. So she says that together, Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey worked in tandem to launch what will become the largest and most influential Pan-Africanist movement of the 20th century. Ashwood notes, our joint love for Africa and our concern for the welfare of our race urged us on to immediate action. Together, we talked over the possibilities of forming an organization to serve the needs of the peoples of African origin. Ashwood explained, and we spent many hours deliberating what exactly our aims should be and what means we should employ to achieve those aims. The early meetings of the UNIA were actually held at her parents' home. So again, we see a direct contribution made by a Black woman to the growth of the largest Black nationalist movement of the 20th century, arguably of US history, right? Amy Ashwood Garvey also played a fundamental role in popularizing the Negro World, the UNIA official newspaper. She recalls that from midnight until 4 in the morning, Marcus and I would trudge around the streets of Harlem, putting a slim copy of the Negro World under people's doors. Through her efforts, Ashwood ensured that women would be well integrated into the UNIA's constitution, and she also helped to create a system in which women would have opportunities to serve in both the public and private roles. So Amy Ashwood Garvey, significant contributions, arguably the most important contributions outside of the Honorable Marcus Garvey himself. Now moving on to another powerful sister, Irene M. Blackstone. With few visible leadership positions available to Black women during this period, the 1920s, the UNIA provided a unique opportunity for women to maintain public roles. So this is during a time of the NAACP is emerging, the Urban League is strong and well, and there's this lack of representation of Black women within positions of leadership. And here comes the UNIA, a Black nationalist Pan-Africanist organization who embraces the leadership qualities and the leadership fire of Black women and says, you know what, no, we're going to provide opportunities for Black women to lead because they have a certain perspective that Black men don't have, right? So this is crucial for us to know. Irene M. Blackstone, who previously served as the president of the Negro Women's Business League, joined the UNIA in Harlem in 1917. She soon became the president of the New York UNIA Ladies Division. In a passionate speech delivered to a group of UNIA members in 1923, Blackstone advocated Black economic empowerment and called on Black men and women to boycott white-owned businesses. Remember, this is the 1920s. We think of boycotts and Black economic development as these ideas that come from the 1950s and 60s, where it was Black women who in the 1920s, almost 40 years, 50 years prior to the 1960s and the 1950s, Black women were the ones articulating these views in front of the masses of people. So again, we see very, very significant contributions being made by Black women. Another powerful sister, Ethel Maud Collins. She was born in 1892 in Jamaica and migrated to the US during the Great Migration. When she arrived in Harlem in 1920, she joined a vibrant community of Afro-Caribbean men and women. She soon became an active member of the Garvey movement within a year of arriving. She frequently attended UNIA meetings in Harlem. She did clerical work for the organization. She invested in the Black Star Line. By the late 1920s, so that's about 10 years, right, after she arrived in the US and joined the Garvey movement. So about a year later, or 10 years later, she was appointed executive secretary of the Garvey Club in New York and acting secretary of the UNIA. Amy Jacques Garvey. She was born in 1895. She relocated to the US in 1917. During her early years in the UNIA, she served as a secretary in the UNIA's main office and helped Garvey plan his speaking tours. In 1923, she published the first edition of the Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, a collection of Garvey's speeches and essays. This book right here, published by a Black woman. The contributions of Black nationalist women to Black nationalism cannot be overlooked. They cannot be underrepresented or underfocused on. This entire book was published by a Black woman. This book transforms the lives of Black people today, including myself, right? If Amy Garvey does not take it upon herself to publish this, we may not even have a book like this today. So again, it's important for us to not only investigate the relationship between Black nationalism and Black women, but seriously do analysis to find out the major contributions that Black women have made and continue to make. From 1924 to 1927, she edited the women's page of the Negro World, Our Women and What They Think, providing a significant platform for UNIA women to articulate their views without direct male censorship. So again, the role of writing and literature and propaganda and news in the promotion of Black women and the leadership of Black women, that role cannot be understated. Henrietta Benton Davis. She became the organization's first female president. She was a close associate of influential Black leaders such as Frederick Douglass. She was one of the most talented and prolific Black actresses of the period. Henrietta Benton Davis is one of my favorite Black nationalist women to study because what she represents is the defiance of middle-class expectations of Black people. She embodies this because she's an actress, right? And with being an actress and being a successful one comes social status and a certain amount of wealth, right? Putting it in proper context, right? And she joins the UNIA at 56 years old in 1916, right? And within 3 years, she becomes the UNIA's international organizer. She becomes the vice president of the Black Star Line. So Henrietta Vinton Davis embodies this whole idea of giving your life to the people in the name of Black nationalism and the building of our Black nation. She joined the UNIA at 56 years old. To me, that's just, it's so profound for us to study. And you would never imagine learning about a sister like this, let alone a Black person, right? Whose work and contributions to the struggle for Black people were like this, right? Mamie Demeana, powerful sister. She was a leading figure in the UNIA, mentored by Henrietta Vinton Davis. In 1922, she became increasingly active in the Garvey movement, and within a matter of years, she became one of the key women leaders, playing an instrumental role in promoting Garvey's teachings throughout the diaspora, and on numerous occasions, serving as a translator and organizer during UNIA promotional tours. Now, along with that, there was the statement that the UNIA provided unique opportunities for women to lead. Not only did the UNIA provide unique opportunities for women to lead, the UNIA built specific branches or wings, if you will, of the organization that were entirely occupied by Black women. So an example would be the Black Cross Nurses, established by Henrietta Vinton Davis in 1921 in Philadelphia to provide a range of services in Black communities. This is an all Black, all female wing of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, right? You have nurses, doctors, all types of services being provided by Black women to Black people. And you also have the African Motor Corps, which was the all-female paramilitary wing of the UNIA, where Garveyite women learned military drills and a variety of automotive skills. So not only do you have entire wings of Black women, but you also have entire wings of fighting Black women, of soldiers of Black women. UNIA, in my belief and in historical evidence, UNIA was one of the most progressive, for lack of a better term, was one of the most progressive organizations when it came to leadership between men and women, period. Now, moving on to the PME, the Peace Movement of Ethiopia. Mitty Magdalena Gordon, the sister from the picture with Sada Shakur on the right side, similar to Amy Ashworth Garvey and civil rights leader Ella Baker, who emerged as street scholars in Harlem during the 1920s, Gordon defied traditional middle-class expectations of Black women in order to disseminate her nationalist philosophy. This is so crucial for us to note, because when it comes to socioeconomic status, when it comes to class, we see a consistency in Black nationalism being that ideology that breaks our people out of that misunderstanding of values and that misplacement of energies, right? So you have some of our people, just a quick sidebar, some of our people who may occupy a particular class, right? Let's say they're middle class, middle class, upper middle class Black folks, right? They have a little bit of money, a little bit of status. There's the tendency, and this, pull another book off the shelf. This is covered entirely in E. Franklin Frazier's Black Bourgeoisie, right? You have an entire group of Black people who emerge as this bourgeoisie, and this comes from socioeconomic status, class, right? A certain income is being earned, and with that comes the disposal of collectivism and Ubuntu and other values and beliefs that are indigenous to African people, right? Black nationalism, as history has shown, is that one ideology that breaks our people out of that mindset and says, hold on, I have this status, I have this particular class, status that I hold, but my people are starving. My people are dying every day, right? There's a much bigger issue going on that's bigger than myself and bigger than me attaining, a little bit of money or a little bit of status. So you have people, Amy Ashford Garvey, Henrietta Vinton Davis, Ella Baker, and now Minnie Marlena Gordon, who have this status and who have this comfort to life. And Black nationalism influences within them the urge to dispose of all of that and to embrace their people in the spirit of Black nationalism, right? So just a quick sidebar for that. With limited financial resources during a global economic crisis, Gordon skillfully organized Black men and women in the city of Chicago and established the Peace Movement of Ethiopia, PME. This was the largest Black nationalist organization established by women in the US, right? And it functioned as a crucial space for working poor Black men and women to engage in Black nationalist and internationalist politics. What we'll also see is that Black nationalism has always embraced the poor and working class masses, right? Back to the clip from Kwame Ture, right? He says that what we have are the hearts of our people, all we need are their minds. You have various examples throughout history, Black nationalist examples of organizations that understood this and said, okay, we have the hearts of our people. How can we build organizations to grasp their minds, right? To organize our people into a space to love struggle and to love knowledge. The Peace Movement in Ethiopia is a prime example. Because of her affinity for Africa as the homeland of Black people and her belief that immigration was a crucial step toward its redemption, Gordon maintained the view that Africa provided the only logical destination for people of African descent. She went through with plans to establish the PME, drawing inspiration from Garvey's UNIA. The PME's motto, one God, one country, one people, was a rephrasing of the UNIA's motto, one God, one aim, one destiny. We have a direct inspiration from the Honorable Marcus Garvey to the future of Black nationalist organizing, right? The PME's official constitution reflected the same tone and language from Garvey's 1920 Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World. It underscored Garvey's race-first philosophy and strong commitment to immigration. So again, you have Black nationalist women embracing Black nationalist values and principles and organizing autonomously, right, in the spirit of those values and principles and embracing this race-first philosophy. Nothing about that is feminist, so we can't call these Black women feminists just because they're women, right? We need to separate the common cultural mistake of equating women, regardless of race, with them wanting or with feminism being the most viable ideology for women, right? Set the World on Fire articulates, and it's also my personal belief, that Black nationalism is the most viable ideology for Black women. And this lesson that we're going through here is a prime example of that, right? You can take my personal beliefs out of it. The history shows that Black women themselves have seen the politics, the principles of Black nationalist women or Black nationalism and embraced them, right? Also interesting that there's a very crucial aspect of Black women's embrace of Black nationalism, because there was a specific and intentional embrace of internationalist politics, right? Minnie Marlena Gordon, she used the term Ethiopia, Peace Movement in Ethiopia, to refer to all peoples of African descent. This was rooted in the ideological underpinnings of Ethiopianism, which were the race redemption ideas derived from biblical Ethiopia. Gordon's use of the term in 1932 was symbolic. Significantly, the establishment of the PME coincided with the reign of Ethiopia's Emperor Haile Selassie, who had been crowned 2 years prior. So again, we have an embrace of internationalist politics and the embrace of understanding that we are a global people and we cannot be free until all of our people across the globe are free, right? PME meetings provided an intellectual space for working poor Black men and women to engage in Black nationalist discourses and address important issues of the day. Each PME meeting centered on key themes for discussion, and Gordon, along with various other male and female leaders in the organization, presented speeches that addressed these matters and then provided opportunities for members of the audience to raise questions. So you have a very profound and intentional attempt made, a successful attempt made by a Black nationalist woman to educate the poor and working class masses of our people. Words cannot words cannot describe how profound this is, right? Because if we look to other organizations and their embrace of other ideologies, and we're not going to get into which ones are better, which ones are worse. That's not the topic of discussion, right? You see a consistent pattern from Black nationalism and Black nationalist organizing that calls for the educating of the poor and working class masses, and you have a direct answer to the call that Kwame Ture put forth of organizing the people for their minds, right? We already have their hearts inherently, now we need their minds. Black nationalist organizing did just that. Now, on this notion of class, right, Black bourgeoisie, although the PME received considerable support from Black working class Chicagoans, many middle class and elite race leaders opposed the organization and its values. The Black masses often embraced immigration plans in their quest for economic and social autonomy, whereas members of the Black middle class and elite generally resisted these efforts. No doubt, social status informed these perspectives, as members of the Black elite often saw their prospects for further economic and political advancement in the US in a more favorable light. Those who struggled to meet their day-to-day needs, however, generally expressed a greater willingness to leave the United States regardless of their views on Black nationalism. Quick sidebar, this last point right here, I believe that we can take this point and apply it directly to today, May 31st, 2020. If we look at Killer Mike and T.I. and other members of the Black celebrity class, of the middle class, elite class of our people, you hear this rhetoric and this message being conveyed to the masses of our people: stop burning, our communities down, rioting and looting our crimes. Those things achieve no change. The mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Bottoms, said, this is chaos. This is not in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. This is chaos. If you want to make a change, register to vote, right? And we're not going to get into how we feel about that on this lesson, but we see how social status informs these perspectives. And the mayor said it. She said, Killer Mike and T.I. own half of the West Side, or all of the West Side of Atlanta, right? That indicates a particular social status and a particular economic class. That's not poor and working class. That's upper middle class and even high class, right? That's capitalism at its utmost best, right? And if we do a proper analysis of capitalism, we will see capitalism is our enemy and it must be destroyed. So for those of our people who embrace capitalism as a saving grace for Black people, they are siding with the enemy. So T.I., Killer Mike, Keisha Bottoms, all these people are embracing the enemy's tools, right? And the enemy's ideologies, right? Black nationalism says we do away with the enemy's tools, we do away with the enemy's ideologies, and we do for ourselves. So today, again, taking this last point, today, if we are to properly understand the most adequate approaches our people need to embrace, it's that organizing the poor and working class of our people to bring to a halt the enemy's institutions and the enemy's ideologies from poisoning the minds of our people, right? It's very telling for celebrities who the poor and working class idolize today, for those same people to come out and say, what you're doing is wrong, looting is bad, rioting is bad, that solves nothing, right? We see how the Black bourgeoisie as a class, as a group, is weaponized by the enemy to turn on Black people, right? Black nationalism calls for organizing the poor and working classes. Black capitalists, Black celebrities, well, Black celebrities are capitalists, period. That group, that elite group, is in direct opposition to Black nationalism. They have to be, right? It's a thing of principles and contradictions within those principles, right? That's just a slight sidebar. There she is. Minnie Marlena Gordon recognized that the struggle against white supremacy in the United States was intertwined with the larger struggle against white imperialism worldwide. Linking local and national concerns to global ones, Gordon used her letters as a way to disseminate her Black internationalist ideas to Southern followers. In this way, The PME's weekly meetings provided an intellectual space for local Blacks, many sharecroppers and tenant farmers, to engage Black internationalist discourse at the grassroots level. Now moving on to some nationalist organizing in the Jim Crow South, right? Celia Jane Allen, she was born and raised in Mississippi. She joined the peace movement of Ethiopia. Her organizing activities in the Deep South were part of the PME strategy after their failed petition to the Roosevelt administration in 1933. The Roosevelt petition, quick sidebar, was a petition written by the PME, written to, who was it? Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, the president at the time. The petition called for the United States paying for chartered boats and ships to ship Black people in the U.S. back to Africa, right? This was an attempt made by Black women and Black nationalists several times. They all failed, right? But that's an attempt still, right? In the year after the FDR petition, PME founder Mittie Marlena Gordon and her supporters began to extend their political activities to the South, specifically targeting rural Black sharecroppers. From 1937 to 1942, Allen led a grassroots Black nationalist movement in Mississippi and the neighboring states, advocating for Pan-African unity, economic self-sufficiency, and political self-determination during a period of economic instability. With the focus on building relationships and developing local leaders, Allen led a pro-immigration campaign in the U.S. South, which she envisioned as a viable solution to the social, economic, and political challenges facing Black men and women in the U.S. and across the African diaspora. Here we go. This is very, very important. Various ancestors have made this crucial distinction between organizing and mobilizing. In Keisha Blaine's book, she also does this. And we need to be sure that we have a proper understanding of the difference, because there is a big difference, or big differences, I should say. So the organizing tradition centers on transforming the political consciousness of individuals in order to build greater participation in civic and political life. It represents the bottom-up, community-based political activism that was vital to the development of local leaders, right? Mobilizing, on the other hand, is an emphasis on large-scale, short-term public events. There's a distinction. And of course, it's more elaborate than that. This is the distinction that Keisha Blaine writes in her book. I would argue that it definitely deserves much more expansion, but this is the gist of it, right? Celia Jane Allen's efforts to organize rural Black men and women in Mississippi and in other nearby states underscore the continued salience and influence of Black nationalism in the Jim Crow South during the 1930s and the 1940s. Significantly, Allen's activities highlights the crucial role women played in sustaining Black nationalist politics and reveals how these women strategically adapted their actions and ideological messages to fit the local settings in which they worked. Again, the 1930s is 30 years before the Black Power movement. 1940s is 20 years before the Black Power movement. Yet, Black nationalism as an ideology is permeated throughout the deep Jim Crow South, right? We need to understand Black nationalism has been the most historically adaptive and the most viable ideology employed by Black men and Black women in the organizing struggle for our people, right? Well, like this wraps it up. Amy Jacques Garvey says that the doll baby type of woman is a thing of the past, and the wide awake woman is forging ahead, prepared for all emergencies and ready to answer any call, even if it be to face the cannons on the battlefield. I believe that this quote from Amy Garvey really signals to us the dedication and tenacity of Black women and their embrace of Black nationalism, right? And again, when we go back to these particular views and perspectives Black women articulated today, when we take them out of context, they sound like feminist views, they sound like, gender first politics, but in their proper historical context, they were articulated in the spirit of Black nationalist race first organizing. We need to understand that. So that wraps up our lesson for this evening, for today. PE with ABC is an attempt by the African Black Coalition to embrace freedom education. That's what Elimu Huru is in Swahili, freedom education. And we believe that it's up to us as Black nationalists, as Pan-Africanists, right, to have a firm understanding of the role of education in our freedom. So that is, again, that concludes our presentation today. Does anyone have any questions? We can go back to a slide if we want to. Again, for all of you who participated, this presentation as well as this recording will be made available to you in an email, so you can access it at any time if you wish. But that does conclude our lesson for this evening. Again, during heavy and turbulent times such as these, it can be deceptively easy for us to get instigated emotionally, right? We can fall victim to our own anger and our own frustration with our enemies, right? And we may react, right, out of that emotion. We may react and not respond, right? It's up to us to be able to fall back on the foundation of the teachings of our ancestors to properly guide us. The question to the answer of what's the solution, the first solution is to read, is to study. Now, not in and of itself and not by itself, but to channel, again, those teachings and that wisdom and that knowledge into your organizing efforts today, right? That's part one. Part two, join a Black-led organization, and not just any organization that is a bunch of Black people together. We've seen throughout our history the failures at organizing Black people because there was not this race-first nationalistic mentality. Find you a nationalist revolutionary organization that is working to transform the conditions of the poor and working class of our masses. The masses are the heart of our movement, right? With that heart, we need to be able, as Kwame Ture teaches us, to harness their minds. And we do that through constant political education, through meeting the needs of our people, feeding our people, clothing our people, housing our people. Rioting does not do that. Now, that doesn't mean we're putting down rioting or protesting or looting. Those are very viable forms of organizing, for sure. The question that needs to be asked is, what is the end goal of this? If we riot today, what do we do tomorrow? If we burn down a police station today, what do we do tomorrow? We need to always frame our organizing efforts around transforming the material conditions of the poor and working class of our masses. It's easy for us who have access to resources and have material things to condemn those of our people who loot. We don't know that those of our people who are looting the grocery store because they don't have food at home. Those of our people who are looting a clothing store don't have clothes at home. What are we doing in our everyday work to ensure our people don't need to loot, but they can be provided for and fed and served by their own people? That's the goal that we should be striving for in our everyday work. So again, that wraps it up. This is PU with ABC. At the end of this lesson, there will be a post-evaluation form sent out to you all. Please, please, please take the time to fill that out. That helps us improve our program. It lets us know what we can, work on, what does work well, what doesn't work well. So it helps us, better ourselves as an organization and as a program. So please fill that out. Once you do fill out that evaluation, I will send out the recording as well as the slides to this lesson. With that, I will say, oh, wait, hold on. We got questions. Oh, let me see. In that way, would you say mobilization needs to be reinforced by organization based on the definitions? Yes. Quick sidebar. Okay, thank you. This is a good question. Kwame Ture, in a lecture, gives his own distinction of organizing and mobilizing. And what he says is very crucial. He says that to be a mobilizer, right? Or he says to be an organizer, you must be a mobilizer, right? But being a mobilizer does not make you an organizer. Organizing is the prerequisite. It's the foundation upon which we can mobilize, which we can build. So to answer this question of would mobilization need to be reinforced by organization? Absolutely, absolutely. mobilizing can be thought of as a march, a protest, a riot, a rebellion, looting. Those are mobilizing actions, and they are viable tactics, right? Organizing is the foundation of all of that. Organizing is the vision. Organizing is the mission. Organizing is the goal, the long-term goal, the goal that transcends your current generation and your current lifetime. That's what organizing is. So without that, mobilizing becomes sporadic, and it just becomes these random acts that don't seem to have a particular focus, a particular direction. So to answer the question, yes, organizing definitely reinforces and needs to reinforce mobilizing. So again, that concludes it. P with ABC. The next one will be next month. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but I will get that. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will say peace and Black power to you all. Stay safe, stay studying, right? Stay committed to our people. If you're not in a Black nationalist organization, find one, join one. The African Black Coalition is a good one to join, right? But yes, in the spirit of our ancestors, or to the ancestors in whose paths we walk, to the elders whose children we are, we give thanks. Peace, Black power.